Sometimes life gives us everything we think we want, and still we find ourselves empty, alone, lost in the echoes of what could have been. But every so often, in the most unexpected ways, life also offers us something else, a second chance, a chance to right the wrongs we once turned away from, a chance to heal what we never knew was broken. Today, you'll hear the story of Andrew Whitmore, a man who built an empire only to discover that the greatest treasures are not counted in dollars, but in the beating hearts of those we choose to love. A story of fate, forgiveness, and the kind of love that refuses to be forgotten, even by time itself. This is the story of how a millionaire found not just two lost boys, but the pieces of his own soul he thought he had lost forever. Stay with us. We'd love to have you join our growing community of dreamers, believers, and storytellers. Now, let's begin. It had been raining that evening, the kind of cold, soaking rain that made even the wealthiest penthouses feel a little lonely. Andrew Whitmore, one of the most successful real estate moguls in the country, sat alone in his sprawling Manhattan apartment, nursing a glass of bourbon. His walls were adorned with artwork worth millions, his floors covered in marble imported from Italy, but none of it filled the aching silence that had crept into his life. His fortune had given him everything, except a family, except love. As he stared out over the city skyline, lights twinkling like distant dreams, a headline flashed across the muted TV screen in the corner. Two orphaned twin boys found in an abandoned building. Something inside Andrew stirred. He turned up the volume, the remote trembling slightly in his hand, as if he already knew, in some unexplainable way, that this moment would change everything. The news anchor spoke in a soft, urgent tone. Authorities found twin boys, approximately 5 years old, living alone in a condemned building on the Lower East Side. No known relatives. Andrew couldn't look away. The camera cut to a blurry shot of the boys being wrapped in thin, tattered blankets, their faces smeared with dirt, their wide, hollow eyes staring into the night. They looked familiar. Not in any specific way, but something about them gnawed at the deepest corners of his soul, like a memory he had long buried but could never quite erase. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he made calls to friends, to lawyers, to anyone who might pull the right strings. He paced the marble floors until dawn, fueled by a desperation he didn't fully understand. His mind raced with 1,000 questions he couldn't answer, only one certainty anchoring him. He had to find those boys. Within a month, after an exhausting process filled with background checks, interviews, and courtroom appearances, Andrew Whitmore, the man who could have had anything he wanted, stood nervously outside a modest children's home, a bouquet of sunflowers trembling in his hand. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was all he could think to bring. Something alive, something bright. He named them Samuel and Noah, names he chose carefully, names that felt like promises whispered into the universe. The early years were not easy. The boys flinched at sudden movements, hoarded food under their beds, and woke screaming from nightmares they couldn't explain. They spoke little, their trust fractured by a world that had abandoned them. Andrew, who had brokered billion-dollar deals with the steely confidence of a titan, found himself helpless in the face of their silent pain. He learned to braid hair, fix broken toys, and chase away monsters from beneath beds. He sat through endless episodes of children's shows, clapped at school plays, and spent weekends building blanket forts in the living room. His assistants joked that he had softened, that the once imposing tycoon now carried dinosaur stickers on his suit jackets. But Andrew knew the truth. These boys were healing him more than he could ever heal them. Time, like sand slipping through desperate fingers, moved swiftly. 10 years passed in a blink. Samuel and Noah grew into bright, strong young men, the kind who held the door open for strangers and still said thank you at every meal. Andrew watched with pride as they excelled in school, sports, and music. He threw birthday parties, attended every parent-teacher conference, cheered from the bleachers until he was hoarse. And yet, somewhere deep inside, an unease festered, a whisper he couldn't quite catch. Something unfinished, something waiting. It happened on a warm June afternoon. They had gone to the beach, just the three of them, to celebrate Samuel and Noah's 15th birthday. Laughter echoed against the waves as Andrew set up the picnic, snapping pictures on his old Polaroid camera, a relic he'd found tucked away in a storage closet. The boys built sandcastles, wrestled in the surf, their laughter pure and free. Back at home, Noah leafed through the photos, giggling at goofy poses. Then he froze. "Dad," Noah said, his voice trembling. "What's this?" Andrew turned to see Noah holding a picture, but not one they had taken today. It was an old photo, sun-bleached and worn, that must have been tucked behind the fresh prints. The image showed a young woman, barely out of her teens, smiling shyly at the camera, a glinting silver ring on her finger. In her arms, two babies, twins. Andrew's heart slammed against his ribs. He knew that face. Caroline. The name crashed into him like a tidal wave. Caroline. The girl he had loved recklessly in his youth. The one he had walked away from when ambition had blinded him to everything but success. She had cried when he left, pleaded, said she had something important to tell him, but he had never stayed long enough to listen. He took the photo from Noah's shaking hands. His fingers found the tiny inscription on the back, written in faded ink. "Sam and Noah, our little miracles. Love, Caroline." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Andrew stumbled back into a chair, clutching the photo to his chest, gasping for breath as the walls closed in around him. The ache in his chest became unbearable, a raw, searing pain that tore him open from the inside. "Dad!" Samuel's voice cracked. "What does it mean?" Andrew couldn't speak. Tears streamed down his face, blurring the photo in his hands. All the years, all the choices, all the loneliness. It all led to this moment. He hadn't saved the boys. They had been his sons all along, and he had abandoned them before he ever even knew them. The revelation ripped through him with a violence he hadn't thought possible. He wept, not the silent tears of regret, but gut-wrenching sobs that shook his body to its core. He had failed them, failed Carolyn, failed the very love he thought he had lost long ago. And now he had a second chance. Or maybe a chance to finally atone. The truth had shattered him, but perhaps, just perhaps, love could still piece him back together. The following days passed in a haze of silence and sorrow. Andrew barely ate, barely slept, unable to shake the weight of the revelation. He watched Samuel and Noah from a distance, memorizing every feature, every gesture, and seeing Caroline in the tilt of Noah's smile, in the fierce protectiveness that flickered across Samuel's face. He knew he owed them the truth. He owed them more than he could ever repay. One evening, as the sunset poured molten gold across the apartment, Andrew gathered the courage to sit them down. His voice shook as he spoke, unraveling the story of his youth, the ambition that had consumed him, the love he had walked away from, and the heartbreak he had never faced until now. Samuel and Noah listened in stunned silence. Tears welled in their eyes, but they didn't pull away. They reached for him instead, and in their touch, Andrew felt a forgiveness he hadn't dared hope for. But forgiveness was not the end. It was the beginning of a harder journey, redemption. Andrew became obsessed with piecing together Caroline's final years. He tracked down her former neighbors, pawed through public records, visited the places she had worked, the shabby apartments she had called home. Each discovery cut deeper than the last. A woman fighting alone against impossible odds, too proud to ask for help, too strong to give up. He learned of her illness, leukemia, and the way she had hidden her sickness from the world until her body could no longer fight. How, even in her final days, her thoughts had never been of herself, but of her boys. It gutted him. Andrew stood over Caroline's unmarked grave one gray morning, Samuel and Noah flanking him like sentinels. The cemetery was quiet, save for the soft rustle of wind through the trees. He knelt, placing a single white rose on the weathered earth. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking, "for leaving you, for not being there, for everything." The boys knelt beside him, each placing their hands gently on his back, steadying him. They said nothing. Words were useless here, in the sacred silence of grief and absolution. That night they sat around the fireplace, the flames casting soft shadows against the walls. Andrew pulled out a battered shoebox, the few remnants he had salvaged of Caroline's life. Inside were faded photographs, crumpled letters, a necklace she had worn every day. Together they pieced through the fragments of a life lost too soon. They cried, they laughed. They remembered a woman they had never truly known but would never forget. It wasn't perfect. Some nights were heavy with sorrow, others were bright with new memories. Healing wasn't a straight path, but it was a path they walked together. Samuel graduated high school as valedictorian, his speech a love letter to second chances. Noah earned a full scholarship for music, his compositions aching with raw, beautiful emotion that brought audiences to tears. And Andrew, he was there for every moment, every scraped knee, every late-night study session, every small, hard-won triumph. Years later at Samuel's wedding, Andrew stood before a sea of loved ones, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Once, he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion, I thought I had everything, and then I lost everything that mattered without even realizing it. But fate, or maybe grace, gave me a second chance. It gave me two chances, actually. He paused, eyes shining, as he turned to Samuel and Noah. Today, looking at my sons, I see not just the past I missed, but the future we built together. And if there is one thing I've learned, it's this. Real wealth is measured not by what you own, but by who you hold. Samuel and Noah rose from their seats and crossed the room, embracing him tightly, the applause washing over them like a benediction. For the first time in decades, Andrew Whitmore didn't feel the cold loneliness of success. He felt home, because sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't counted in dollars or diamonds, but in the simple, sacred weight of love, whispered in a single world-changing word, Dad. The truth had shattered him, but love had made him whole again. Yet just as the pieces of his life were finally falling into place, fate had one final card to play. Months after Samuel's wedding, as autumn blazed across Central Park in a riot of crimson and gold, Andrew received a letter. It was battered, the ink smudged, as if it had traveled through time itself. No return address, only his name, written in a familiar, careful script he hadn't seen in decades. Inside was a photograph. It showed Caroline, but not as he remembered. She was older, her hair tucked beneath a faded scarf, exhaustion written into every line of her face. She stood in front of a small, rundown building, and beside her, a young girl. A girl with eyes so piercingly familiar that Andrew staggered back, clutching the counter for support. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 in the photo, and she was wearing a necklace. The very same necklace Andrew had given Caroline the night he had first whispered that he loved her. Scrawled on the back of the photo, in trembling handwriting, were 4 words that stopped his heart. Find her. She's yours. The room spun. Another child, a daughter, lost, alone, somewhere out there, waiting. Andrew's vision blurred with tears. His hands shook as he reached for his phone. He had thought the story was over, but the truth was, it had only just begun. Andrew didn't hesitate. He contacted private investigators, combed through old records, followed every slim lead like a man possessed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Each night he stared at the photo of the little girl, feeling the pull of a bond that went beyond logic, beyond reason, a connection written in blood and soul. Samuel and Noah stood by him through it all. They pored over maps together, traced possible shelters and foster homes where a girl like her might have ended up. The hope in their eyes that they could be brothers again to someone they'd never known kept Andrew from falling into despair. Then one gray afternoon, a call came. We found her, the investigator said simply. Her name was Emma. She was now 13 years old, living in a foster home 2 towns away. She had no known family, just a necklace she never took off, a stubborn belief that one day someone would come for her. Andrew's hands trembled as he drove, Samuel and Noah in the car beside him. The world outside blurred into a smear of color, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear anything else. When they arrived at the small, weathered house, Emma was waiting on the porch, hugging herself against the chill. She looked up as they approached, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Those eyes, Caroline's eyes, locked with Andrew's, and something silent, something ancient passed between them. Recognition, a pull stronger than gravity. Emma took a hesitant step forward. Are you, are you him? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Andrew dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and opened his arms. I'm your father, he choked out. And I'm so sorry it took so long. Emma didn't hesitate. She flew into his embrace with a sob that shattered the last of the walls around his heart. Samuel and Noah surrounded them, wrapping their arms around their newfound sister, the four of them locked in a trembling, tear-soaked embrace. They brought Emma home that night. Andrew set up her room with care, choosing soft blankets, shelves of books, everything he thought she might love. Samuel played her a song he wrote just for her. Noah showed her the photo albums of all the memories they had shared and promised she'd be part of everyone from now on. For the first time in her life, Emma slept peacefully, nestled in the safety of a family she had never dared to believe in. And for the first time in his life, Andrew Whitmore felt complete. The following years were a gift he never took for granted. He watched Emma blossom from a shy, wounded girl into a fierce, brilliant young woman. She painted. She wrote stories. She sang with a voice that carried pure, aching beauty. Every holiday, every birthday, every mundane Wednesday afternoon, they celebrated. Not the way millionaires celebrated, with lavish parties or extravagant trips, but with homemade cakes, backyard picnics, whispered prayers of thanks around the dinner table. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the skyline, Andrew stood at the doorway of their living room, watching his three children laugh over an old board game. His throat tightened with emotion. He realized then that the greatest miracle of all was not that he had found them. It was that they had found him. When Emma graduated high school, she asked Andrew to walk her across the stage. As they reached the center, she paused, turned to him, and through tears, whispered the word that still made his heart break and heal all at once. Dad. The crowd erupted into applause, but Andrew barely heard it. All he could hear was the sound of grace, of second chances, of a life reborn. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come in grand gestures or perfect endings. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the arms of those we almost lost, whispering that no matter the mistakes, no matter the years lost, love still waits, and it forgives, and it endures, forever.